The one and only Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report joins us on the program. Scott, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Good, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing great. And the Bucs heading to the West Coast, man, playing the Chargers team that I think a lot of people
Yeah.
feel is the hardest game remaining on their schedule. We'll get into that in a second. But what do you make of this, 3-game winning streak? Obviously, the opposition isn't the greatest, but you're talking about a team that was kind of muddled in mediocrity, and now Scott, they're in first place on this Monday, December 9th. So do you look at it as, hey, there's still some holes in this team and they really need to fix it fast, or, hey, a win's a win?
I mean, a win's a win for sure. I think that's the biggest thing. But, to me, when you look at this stretch, they're doing what they have to do, what they need to do, but also what we expect them to do, which is to beat bad teams. If you're going to be a good team, then you need to beat bad teams. And I will say, the Carolina Panthers are a team that is becoming a good team. They're not there yet. They're not finishing games, but they're better than their record shows. The Giants are a bad team. The Raiders are a bad team. The Panthers, not so much. And the reason why I say that is because the Panthers are coming to Raymond James Stadium in Week 17, so they got to play him again. And Dave Canales, he's got a couple wins, right? 2 in a row. And then they took the Chiefs down to the wire, the Bucs to overtime. They played the Eagles, right down to the wire as well. So they're getting some moral victories, and that's okay when you're a really bad team, when you're like the worst team in the league, right? You hire the new head coach. You look for those moral victories. Remember the days where Tampa Bay would win like maybe 6 games a year, and Jason Light would come home and jump in the pool with the suit on because they won a game they hadn't won in 4 or 5 weeks, right? So you celebrate things like that when you're bad. And you can cling on to, hey, guys, we're this close, right? It was a moral victory. We're this close. That's why when you say the Chargers might be the best team remaining, you're right in terms of records. But there are a couple of teams, the Saints and the Panthers, that do have lesser records that are going to pose problems for the Buccaneers down the stretch, especially the Saints. For whatever reason, Jay, I don't know why, the Saints are 5-1 against the Buccaneers in Raymond James Stadium. They play the Bucs better here than they do there. It's nuts. So there are a couple of games that are kind of fraught with some peril down the stretch. And also, too, I'm not sure if that Bucs-Cowboys game gets flexed out of prime time on December 22nd. I kind of hope that it does, because the Bucs are 0-3 in primetime this year, right? They've lost to the Falcons. They lost at home to the Ravens. They lost at Kansas City. So I'd almost prefer that game be a 1:00 game or a 4:05 game or whatever, just because Dallas, something about primetime with the Cowboys that they seem to play a little bit better than maybe the Bucs do. So first things first, this Chargers game is important. It's what's next. His team is reeling and dealing with some injuries, like they have been all year, but even more so in the secondary now. So it's going to be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you say. I don't know if this was an official thing. I saw yesterday that game wasn't going to be flexed because the NFL felt like there were still a lot of people that are going to tune in because of the strong TV markets in both places. So we'll see. What do we know as far as injury updates on, especially a guy like Antoine Winfield Jr.? We know how important he is on that back end.
Yeah, Todd Bowles said it's a knee injury, going to miss a couple weeks, probably similar to what Tristan Wirfs has been dealing with. That is my guess. Let's put it this way. If they put him on IR, it's probably, a serious MCL sprain where it's going to be 4 weeks or more. It sounded like when Todd said a few weeks that it's going to be more like Tristan Wirfs, where it's a slight MCL sprain, and he'll be able to to come back hopefully in a couple of weeks, because again they're going to need him. These 2 games are important because they're the next ones, right? The Chargers, then the Cowboys. But I'm telling you, throw the records out. These are divisional games against the Carolina Panthers, a team that took the Buccaneers to overtime and in some respects outplayed them. And then the Saints, who, again, remember last year, the Bucs were playing the Saints in Week 17. All they had to do was win the game, and they win the division. And the Saints come out and put up 23 points on the board, 23 to nothing. And then the Bucs score 13 points in garbage time. That was a bit of an upset there. So anything goes when it's Saints, Buccaneers in Tampa. So this is this is why I really appreciate what Todd Bowles said after the game to his team. Getting back in first place is one thing. Staying there is another. It's going to require a Herculean effort on a week in, week out basis to overcome these injuries and play better football. And the good news is we're seeing some growth from this Buccaneer team in certain areas, Jay. And I loved the finish. The first quarter was great. The second and third quarters were awful. I almost wish the team had told me they were going to be awful. I would have scheduled a nap for about an hour and a half, right? And then the fourth quarter, they were able to put the clamps down on defense, score 2 touchdowns on offense, including a dagger at the end to get to 28 points. So they're kind of learning how to finish games now, finish games when they have the lead, and then also come from behind and finish games with the lead. So there's still four more learning growth opportunities for this team. They're going to need every one of them if they're going to get to the playoffs, and then more importantly, once they get there, if they're going to do anything in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Jalen McMillan's certainly one of those guys that stepped up big with a couple of TD grabs yesterday. I wanted to get your opinion, Scott, because I think being at the games, you know this as well as anybody, being at the games, you see certain things sometimes that don't show up, whether it's on the screen or on the score sheet, but you see guys like their temperament. And 2 of the guys that were as pissed off as anybody yesterday going into the locker room and leaving the locker room are Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. Do you think that is because Mike wasn't as involved in the game? Well, it's probably not the same thing. I mean, Baker probably wants some of those throws back. But is there a frustration that they're not doing a good enough job getting Mike the ball? Is it an overall team? Hey, we know that there needs to be room to grow if we're going to get to where we want to go. Like, how do you explain, if you can, Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans not being too thrilled after the contest yesterday?
Well, with Baker, he even said at the podium, he's probably the worst graded offensive player, yesterday, because after that first start, 9 of 11 completions to passes, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. It just kind of unraveled for him there. I've seen enough Buccaneer quarterbacks in my 3 decades of doing this. I started with Trent Dilfer, right? And then, you have guys like Josh Freeman and Jameis Winston and Josh McCown and guys like that, where when the downward spiral starts, it's just going to be one of those days. They're not going to get out of it. I will say this about Baker Mayfield. He has shown the ability to, no matter what happened in the game, good or bad, the last drive or two, he has the ability to rally and kind of put it all together. Sometimes it's enough, sometimes it's not enough, but at least he doesn't go down the drain like some of those other quarterbacks have. So I'll give him that. So he's pissed off just because, they won, but, he did not play well. And it was not happy with his personal performance. Mike Evans is not a diva. We all know that. He is a selfless team first guy. Having said that, he is also a wide receiver. It just comes with the DNA. It's not being diva to want the ball, especially when you're a future Hall of Famer. That's just like intelligence. That's like, duh, like I'm one of the best players on this field. I'm healthy now. Get me the ball so I can help the team. It's always about the team. And typically, the more yards and touchdowns Mike Evans scores, the more wins the Bucks get. So those two go hand in hand. And I feel like, he probably didn't get the ball enough. Probably, upset about that. The 1,000-yard receiving thing, I'm sure, is weighing on him, only because it's unnatural. He's had 1,000 yards every single season, sometimes by just a yard, but it's a record that he has claimed, worked hard for, blood, sweat, tears. And it's probably not going to happen. The math is not working in his favor. And with every game that passes, that becomes a little bit more of a reality. And so I think there's a little bit of crestfallenness about that. And that's okay. I mean, he's entitled to that. Because, again, it's not about his yards. It's about, hey, if I put a touchdown or 2 on the board, we're going to win games, right? That's just all there is to it. So I think he wants to be more involved. And also, too, keep in mind, every game that he missed, they lost, right? So the competitor of Mike Evans is like, okay, I'm here now. Give me the ball. We're going to win. And that's okay. That's what you want. So I'm okay with both of those guys being pissed off for their own reasons. Neither affects the team in a negative way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just think it's a competitive fire, right? I want guys to care, right? People say, oh, being a bad teammate. No, I don't want guys to be happy that they're losing.
Exactly.
So that competitive fire, I love it. 410 yards for Mike in 4 games. It's doable. I mean, it's doable. It's doable. He needs one of those big, 8 catches for $185.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One of those kind of games to kind of make it a little bit easier.
And you know what?
down the
To
stretch.
that point, and you're exactly right. It's not like it's impossible, but it's improbable only because he only has one 100-yard game the entire season, right? So he's going to have to do something that hasn't really been done yet. Is he capable of doing it? Yes, because he has that in him. The other thing that's working against him, and you even heard Liam Cohen say this Thursday at the podium during his press conference, this is not a vertical attack. This is not Bruce Arians, chuck it down the field outside the numbers, right? Or I should say down the seam. This is not a dirt cutter vertical, which is outside the numbers. The kind of the exact opposite of what Arians did, which is, those seam shots down the middle. This is not even Dave Canales, which is play action and deep shot. This is more underneath and intermediate, and the catch and run, which is Mike can do, but it's not like a part of his game. We saw it yesterday with the hurdle and then the 30 plus yard, gain. That is uncommon for Mike. Mike is used to the throw it 40 yards down the field. I'm going to jump up and catch it. It's a 40-yard gain. Like that's been Mike's bread and butter since 2014. He is the guy that will go up and get it and probably not get a whole bunch of yards after the catch. He did show some of that ability last year, a couple 70-yard, including a 75-yard touchdown against Carolina here in Tampa. So he's got that in him, but what's working against him is this offense. It's just not really suited for those deep shots, for those vertical shots that he had when Jameis and Tom Brady were throwing him the ball, and even Baker Mayfield to an extent last year. So that's maybe the unfortunate thing when it comes to that record. But at the same time, hard to argue, right? I mean, the Bucs are fourth or fifth in scoring, 28 points per game. They're sixth in terms of passing yards. Baker Mayfield with 28 touchdowns, already a career high. Anything now is gravy. If he gets to 34 touchdowns, this will be the third highest single season touchdown mark in team history. Jameis had 33 in 2019. Brady had 40 in 2020 and then 43 in 2021. So that would be quite a mark for Baker Mayfield. So, you don't change what's working just for one guy, even though he's a future Hall of Famer, just to get him the ball.
And it's funny because they talk about it too. It's not like they shy away. They wanted to get him. But and two more things. They actually can run the football this year. They ran for $150 yesterday. And Chris Godwin not being in there as well. So I'm sure, they're shading coverage that way, double covering them. So that doesn't help either. I want to ask you about that running game. Any concern with Bucky now? This is the third different injury this year. And I know that, he's a more dynamic runner than a guy like Rachaad White. But one thing that I think a lot of people were losing in the midst of Bucky mania there was he's still a rookie. He's never played 17 games in a season. You're asking this guy to do a little bit of everything. Rachaad, for all he is worth, right? We know we can catch the ball to the backfield. We know he's pretty durable, and we know we can pass block. Unfortunately, so Sean Tucker have a little bit of an issue yesterday. But how do you think, first off, any concern about the Bucky injury woes, and then also down the stretch, getting that he's going to be back to being healthy? How do you think Liam Cohen kind of shakes that whole thing out?
I think it's kind of a blessing in disguise. He had 5 touches yesterday, then he was done, right? He didn't have any more wear and tear. He didn't have 3 hours of football. He had about 30 minutes of football yesterday. So I think that probably works in his favor. A little bit less miles on the tires yesterday. He went from, questionable to doubtful to out, right? And I was fine with that, especially the way Rachaad White was running. And then, of course, Sean Tucker, he can give you a 34-yard run at any point in time. So the fact that they have 2 really good backs behind him, I'm okay with that. And I think at this point in time, if you're thinking optimistically, not to get ahead of yourselves here, right? But you have to kind of be smart about this. I remember you were talking about the Lightning before I came on. And I remember the Lightning, they expended so much energy, right, to win all those games that season. And then for what? To get swept? Was that the year they got swept by Columbus, right? It's like they expended all of that ammo, all of that gas in the tank. And then when it came to the playoffs, they just had nothing left, right? And it was a great regular season accomplishment,
right?
But that's not the goal. That's kind of like the ended up being the consolation prize. And that's not really what you want. So I think for Bucky, he did show he can carry the 25 yards, per game. He did that in Carolina. That's great. You might need that against Detroit or Philly or something in the playoffs. And then it's like, hey, it's lose or go home. I mean, I should say win or go home, right? Lose and you do go home. So save that another performance for that. You know, Bucky's capable of games like that. So even when he comes back, go back to that three-headed monster. I loved what Liam Cohen did against the Giants, right?
Yep.
First drive, granted, it was a touchdown drive, so you had a lot of plays to work with. But in that drive, 3 catches for Bucky, 3 carries for Sean, 3 carries for Rashad. Each back got an equal amount of reps on the first drive. It kind of set the tone for the day. And so I would manage his workload when he comes back just to preserve him, because he is your best running back. You got to preserve him. You can't get to the postseason and then not have him. So I think that they do need to put him on a pitch count, work those other guys in. We've seen Sean step up when he's had to. Gosh, Rashad stepped up yesterday when he had to. So they're capable. Just manage that workload and let Bucky do his thing, but on a limited scale right now because of those injuries. And you mentioned that, and that's a very valid point, Jay. I mean, even though he played at Oregon, right, and you kind of get those bonus games, the championship game, maybe you get into the playoffs or whatever like that, but he didn't have 17 games. No rookie does. And remember, he also played in those preseason games as well. So he's got that extra mileage on him already. Oh, and by the way, there's 4 more games to go at least.
Yeah, I remember Tristan telling me a couple of years in his second year, he's like, it's a lot that first year. Like your body starts going down. You could be the most well-conditioned athlete, but your body's just used to high school, college. You're not used to a week 15 or a week 16 or a week 17. Right. It's a different ball game. What do you make of this pass rush, Scott? Because people for years, it was like, well, if you could help on the outside to get, help on the outside will help on the inside. And you would think vice versa, right? You got Kalijah, you got Vita. I mean, you had 2 sacks just say from LaFonte David and Kayvon Merriweather. Yeah. But I look at the outside and I'm just wondering what is going on with Yaya Diaby. What about the lack of maybe development of a guy like Chris Braswell?
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen people talk about, some of the shortcomings of the defense. I mean, people were saying 10, 12, 15 sacks for Yaya this year, and he's only got a handful, a couple more than you and I. Concern about the pass rush, and this is something that we could see, possibly being rectified down the stretch here in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the resources Jason Light has put into the outside linebacker department, right? It started with Anthony Nelson because he was the first guy out of the current group. He's the old man in the room. 4th round pick, right? That's a started day 3. That's a guy. JTS, 1st round pick. We all agree, he's not lived up to expectations. Right? They overdrafted him in hindsight. We get that. 3rd round pick, day 2 pick, and Yaya Diaby certainly showed some promise last year. Is actually having a better this year at every department but the sacks.
Right.
And then Chris Braswell, 2nd round pick, who I'm still very high on. PFF had a great, grade on him, 88 grade yesterday because he did everything but get to the quarterback. So having said that, a lot of draft capital in these guys, and you mentioned the keyword development. I don't think they're getting developed, right? And I love defensive line play. I even coached it for 6 years at the Pop Warner level. There are some nuts and bolts to pass rushing that are universal, whether it's Pop Warner, high school, college, pro. There's a club rip is a club rip, right? A long arm is a long arm, right? A swim move is a swim move. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a 7-year-old doing it or a 17-year-old doing it or a 27-year-old doing it. It is what it is, right? Spin move, an inside spin is an inside spin. Having said all that, I'm not a fan of George Edwards. I don't think he's a good coach. Right. Honestly, I really don't. And if I'm the Glaziers / Jason Light, and we'll see how this all shakes out. I'm not calling for Todd Bowles to get fired. None of that stuff. We'll see how this whole season plays out. But if Todd Bowles is going to return, then I tell Todd, you're welcome to come back. I know you're going to want to call plays again. That's fine. But your old cronies, and when I mean old, like it's time for some changes, man. The safeties coach, Nick Rapone, and I mean nothing about these guys personally. This is strictly professional talk because I really don't know any of them personally.
Right.
I've got nothing personal against them, done nothing towards me or whatever. So I'm saying this strictly from an analytical professional basis. And keep in mind, every single one of these coaches has probably forgotten more about football than I have. So I'm saying this with some humility. But at the end of the day, this is a results-oriented business. You can say whatever you want about process. It's about results, okay? And they're not getting the results, right? The safety position, Nick Rapone is the safeties coach, and I want to say he's either pushing 70 or in his 70s. And he was Todd Bowles' position coach at Rutgers, okay?
Yeah.
Kevin Ross played with Todd Bowles at Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And, and George Edwards initially got credit for Micah Parsons' development in Dallas. And then they realized when Micah Parsons was like the only guy that was doing anything, they said, wait a minute, it's kind of Micah Parsons, right? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, you can give Mike Evans any wide receivers coach you want. He's had some good ones, Todd Monken included, right? But at the end of the day, Mike Evans is going to be Mike Evans, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of who's coaching him.
Sometimes it's in spite of rather than because of.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Evans' floor coming into this whole thing, it was like A-. Good coaching gets him to an A+. Like, we got that. But like, let's realize where the floor is. So yeah, he's going to need to get a new pass rush coach if he stays. And if he doesn't want to make those changes, then I'm sorry. And sometimes you see that with coaches. It's like, nope, I'm sticking with my guys. Some of these guys are his friends, and like, I get that those are tough decisions to make, but it's like, you got to do what you got to do for the betterment of the team. And at the end of the day, this is Jason Light's team. This is not Todd Bowles' team. He's the general manager. He's going to make the calls. But if you look at what has happened, Jay, on the offensive side of the ball, this offensive line was crap the last couple of years. Right. All of a sudden, it's good. Why is it good with the rookie center? Why is it good with the second-year right guard and a third-year right tackle? Right? And we know Tristan's Tristan, right? Why is Ben Bredesen playing the best football of his career right now in Tampa? And he's more of a journeyman guy because of great coaching. And if you look at the offensive side of the ball, Liam Cohen's 39. Kevin Carberry's in his early 40s. The receivers coach, Brian McClendon, is in his early 40s. Mm-hmm. It's a generational thing, man. It's like you've got young coaches all on the offensive side of the ball that are dealing with today's players. And you get a bunch of guys that are 20 plus years older on the defensive side of the ball. And sometimes we've seen it with Lovie Smith. We've seen it with Mike Smith here in Tampa. Sometimes your approach doesn't reach the kids. Sometimes the game does pass you by. Younger coaches, ones that, I don't know, coming from college, like Liam Cohen, like from Georgia, Brian McClendon, they come with new, fresh ideas, right? That matters. So that's the long-winded answer, but I had a lot to say about it because
I love it.
Because it does make a difference. Coaching matters. If it didn't matter, guess what, Jay? They just tell the players when to show up and play on Sundays, and that's it. But coaching matters.
The coaches would be just sitting there on the bench with their hands behind their head, with their feet up, saying, go out there, call your own plays.
That's right.
We'll go from there.
Yeah.
Scott Reynolds, Pewter Report. Go check him out right now, pewterreport.com. Go read that mailbag. I was reading it this morning, of course, to get ready for the show today, because these guys will have you just wrapped up in all of the Buccaneer knowledge. Scott, appreciate you and all the work that the guys and gals over there do. Stay strong and keep continuing to do your thing. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you again soon, partner.
Anytime, Jay. Thank you.